There comes a moment in every relationship where you have to stop asking yourself, what else can I do? And start asking, what is he willing to do? That's a question a lot of people avoid because they're afraid of the answer. But let me tell you something. The truth will always set you free, even when it hurts first. When you stop chasing, a man's true intentions become clear. That's one of the hardest lessons to learn because when you care about someone, your first instinct is usually to hold on tighter. You think that sending another message, making another phone call, or finding another reason to stay connected will somehow remind him of what he's about to lose. But life doesn't work that way. You cannot convince someone to value what they already have access to if they never appreciated it in the first place. Sometimes the greatest thing you can do is step back and let your absence speak louder than your words ever could. See, a lot of people mistake constant communication for a healthy relationship. They believe that if they keep the conversation going every single day, the relationship will stay alive. But communication is only meaningful when both people genuinely want it. If one person is carrying every conversation, asking every question, planning every meeting, and making every effort, that's not a partnership. That's one person doing all the emotional work while the other simply enjoys the convenience. Love was never designed to be a one-person job. It takes two people who are equally committed to building something that lasts. I've met countless women who say, Steve, I'm always the one texting first. I'm always the one checking in. If I don't call him, I don't hear from him. Then I ask a simple question. Have you ever stopped? Most of the time they say no because they're afraid. They're afraid that if they stop reaching out, the relationship will disappear. But let me tell you something. If the relationship only survives because you're doing all the work, then what you're holding together isn't a relationship. It's a routine that depends entirely on your effort. That's not love. That's emotional maintenance. And eventually it becomes exhausting. The truth is, when you remove your constant effort, you create space for the other person to reveal their own. That's where honesty begins. When you're always filling the silence, you never get the chance to find out whether he would have spoken first. When you're always making plans, you never discover whether he would have invited you. When you're always checking on him, you never know if he would have checked on you. Your constant effort can sometimes hide the reality of the relationship because you're covering every gap before it has a chance to appear. People always ask me, should I stop contacting him to make him miss me? That's the wrong question. The purpose isn't to manipulate someone into chasing you. The purpose is to stop interfering with the truth. If a man truly values you, your absence will naturally catch his attention. He won't need a strategy or a game to realize that something is different. He'll notice because your presence meant something to him. Real feelings don't require tricks. They reveal themselves through consistent action. Think about the people who matter most in your life. If one of them suddenly stopped calling or texting, wouldn't you notice? Wouldn't you wonder if they're okay? Wouldn't you reach out because you care? That's exactly how genuine affection works. Concern creates action. Love doesn't sit comfortably in silence forever. It moves, it reaches, it asks. That's why effort is such an important sign. A person who values the relationship doesn't simply wait for everything to come to them. They contribute, they invest, they participate because they don't want to lose something meaningful. Now, let's be honest. Sometimes when you stop contacting a man, nothing happens. Days pass, then weeks, then even longer. Your phone stays quiet. At first, you'll want to make excuses. You'll tell yourself he's busy. You'll say he's stressed. You'll convince yourself he's probably waiting for the right moment. But eventually, you have to stop listening to excuses and start paying attention to patterns. Patterns tell the truth that words often hide. If someone repeatedly shows that they're comfortable living without communicating with you, believe what they're showing you. That's not about punishment. That's about accepting reality. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they can earn love by trying harder. They think that if they're patient enough, helpful enough, forgiving enough, or available enough, they'll eventually become impossible to lose. But healthy love isn't earned through endless sacrifice. Healthy love grows because both people choose each other every day. One person shouldn't have to convince the other to care. Real love doesn't need constant reminders to stay alive. It naturally seeks connection because that's what love does. You should never feel like you're auditioning for a permanent place in someone's life. You're not supposed to spend every day proving why you're worthy of basic respect, attention, and consistency. Those things aren't rewards for perfect behavior. They're the foundation of every healthy relationship. If someone only gives you attention when it's convenient for them, then they're showing you exactly where you fit into their priorities. Listen carefully to that message because actions rarely lie. When you stop chasing, you're not losing control. You're actually gaining clarity. You're allowing the relationship to stand on its own without your constant support. If it remains strong, then you know the connection was real. If it falls apart the moment you stop carrying it, then you also have your answer. Either way, you've learned something valuable that no amount of guessing could have taught you. The truth may hurt for a while, but confusion hurts much longer. Clarity gives you the freedom to invest your heart in people who are willing to invest theirs in you. Silence often reveals feelings that constant communication hides. Most people are uncomfortable with silence because silence leaves no place to hide. When the messages stop, when the phone no longer rings every few hours, and when there are no more reasons to check in, the relationship is left standing on its own. That's when you begin to see what was real and what was simply being held together by one person's effort. Silence isn't empty. Silence is revealing. It has a way of exposing intentions, priorities, and emotions that words sometimes cover up. See, a lot of people think that talking every day automatically means the relationship is healthy. They believe the number of text messages or phone calls is proof of love. But communication by itself doesn't tell the whole story. Someone can send you messages all day long and still have no intention of building a future with you. At the same time, someone who genuinely cares about you will communicate with consistency, honesty, and purpose. The difference isn't found in the number of conversations. It's found in the meaning behind them. I've seen relationships where one person sends 10 messages before getting one reply. Then they tell themselves, well, at least he answered. No, that's not the standard you should be measuring. You shouldn't celebrate receiving the bare minimum from someone who's supposed to value you. A relationship isn't supposed to leave you feeling like you're begging for someone's attention. If every conversation depends on your effort, then you have to ask yourself an important question. If I stopped talking today, would this relationship still exist tomorrow? That's a difficult question because many people already know the answer. They just don't want to admit it. Instead, they keep filling every moment with conversation because they're afraid of what silence might reveal. They think if they stop texting first, the connection will disappear. But if silence is powerful enough to erase the relationship, then maybe the relationship wasn't as strong as you believed. Silence removes distractions. It removes excuses. It removes the constant activity that can make a relationship appear healthier than it actually is. When there's no one forcing the conversation forward, the truth has room to breathe. If someone truly enjoys having you in their life, they'll naturally look for you. They'll notice your absence because your presence mattered. They won't wait forever, hoping you'll make the first move again. They'll take responsibility for reaching out because they don't want distance to grow between the two of you. Real feelings don't disappear just because the conversation pauses. Genuine care doesn't need constant reminders. Think about the people you truly love. If you haven't heard from them for a while, don't they cross your mind? Don't you wonder how they're doing? Don't you feel the desire to check on them? That's what authentic connection looks like. It creates concern, and concern creates action. Love isn't passive. It doesn't sit comfortably while someone important slowly fades away. Sometimes people confuse comfort with commitment. A man may become comfortable knowing you'll always be the one to call first, always be the one to fix every misunderstanding, and always be the one to restart every conversation. Over time, he stops putting in effort because he expects you to carry the relationship. Not necessarily because he's a bad person, but because people often settle into patterns that require the least amount of effort. That's why changing your behavior can reveal so much. The moment you stop doing everything, you find out whether he was participating or simply benefiting from your consistency. Now, let's be clear. Silence is not about punishment. It's not about making someone worry or creating unnecessary drama. It's about stepping back long enough to see whether the relationship can breathe without you doing all the work. Healthy love should never depend on one person constantly holding everything together. If the bond is genuine, both people will naturally contribute because they both value what they're building. Many people fear silence because they believe it automatically means rejection. That's not always true. Sometimes silence simply creates space for reflection. It gives both people an opportunity to recognize what they have. In today's world, we're constantly surrounded by noise. Notifications, messages, social media, and endless conversations leave very little room for people to actually think, Sometimes stepping back allows someone to realize just how important your presence has been all along. But here's the important part. You cannot control what another person discovers during that silence. You can only control what you discover. While you're waiting to see whether he reaches out, you're also learning something about yourself. You're learning whether you've become emotionally dependent on constant reassurance. You're learning whether you've been confusing attention with affection. You're learning whether you've been accepting inconsistency because you were afraid of being alone. Growth often begins in quiet moments. It's easy to ignore problems when life stays busy. It's much harder to ignore them when everything becomes still. Silence forces honesty. It asks questions that constant conversation often avoids. Is this relationship balanced? Is the effort mutual? Do I feel appreciated, or do I simply feel tolerated? Am I constantly anxious, or do I feel secure? Those answers become much clearer when you stop trying to manage every interaction. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that words always tell the truth. People can promise forever while behaving as though tomorrow doesn't matter. They can say they miss you while making no effort to see you. They can say they care while repeatedly placing you at the bottom of their priority list. That's why actions matter so much more than promises. Silence gives actions the opportunity to speak. Without constant conversation covering everything up, behavior becomes impossible to ignore. At the end of the day, silence isn't your enemy. Uncertainty is. And sometimes silence is the only path that leads to certainty. Whether someone moves towards you or continues walking away, you'll finally have something stronger than hope. You'll have evidence. You'll no longer have to guess how much you matter, because their response, or their lack of response, will tell you far more than endless conversations ever could. A man who truly values you will respond with action, not excuses. That's one of the clearest truths about relationships, yet it's also one of the most difficult for people to accept. We live in a world where words are easy to say. A person can promise you forever in a 5-minute conversation. They can tell you they care, tell you they're trying, tell you they're thinking about you, and tell you that everything will get better someday. But none of those words create a healthy relationship unless they are followed by consistent action. Real love has always been something you can see, not just something you can hear. I've learned over the years that people often become experts at explaining away someone else's behavior. They'll say, he's just under a lot of pressure right now. Then a few weeks later, they'll say, work has been really busy. A month after that, they'll say, he's dealing with family problems. Then it's stress, then it's timing, then it's fear of commitment. Before they realize it, they've spent months or even years defending someone who has never shown them the level of effort they deserve. Now, don't misunderstand me. Life happens. Everybody goes through difficult seasons. We all have moments when work becomes overwhelming, family responsibilities increase, or unexpected challenges demand our attention. But here's the difference. A person who truly values you doesn't disappear during those seasons. They communicate, they make an effort. Even if they can't give you all their time, they give you honesty. They don't leave you wondering where you stand. They don't expect you to survive on confusion while they offer nothing but silence. Think about the people who genuinely matter to you. No matter how busy life becomes, you still find a way to check on them. Maybe it's a short phone call. Maybe it's a quick message saying, I've had a busy day, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. That takes less than a minute. The effort isn't measured by how long the message is. It's measured by the willingness to make sure the other person knows they matter. Too many people confuse excuses with explanations. An explanation comes with responsibility. An excuse comes with avoidance. There's a huge difference between saying, I've been overwhelmed this week, but I don't want you to think I've forgotten about you, and saying absolutely nothing while expecting the other person to patiently wait forever. One response builds trust. The other slowly destroys it. You should never have to become a detective in your own relationship. You shouldn't spend hours trying to figure out why someone takes days to respond while remaining active everywhere else. You shouldn't have to guess whether they still care, because their actions should answer that question long before your worries begin. Healthy relationships create security, not constant anxiety. When someone consistently shows up, you don't have to keep asking yourself whether you're important. Their behavior already tells you. One of the biggest mistakes people make is falling in love with potential instead of reality. They keep saying, I know he can be an amazing man. Maybe he can, but potential doesn't build relationships. Actions do. You cannot date who someone might become someday. You have to honestly evaluate who they are today. If today's actions leave you feeling ignored, unimportant, and emotionally exhausted, then hoping tomorrow will magically be different isn't a strategy. It's wishful thinking. Real commitment isn't demonstrated during convenient moments. It's demonstrated when making an effort requires sacrifice. Anybody can be loving when everything is easy. Anybody can be attentive when life is perfect. The true character of a relationship appears during difficult times. Does he still make time? Does he still communicate? Does he still look for ways to reassure you even when life feels complicated? Those moments reveal the depth of his commitment far more than grand romantic speeches ever could. I've seen people stay in relationships because they keep believing the next promise. I'll do better. Things will change. Just give me more time. There's nothing wrong with giving someone the opportunity to grow if they're genuinely trying, but growth has visible evidence. Change has results. If the same conversation keeps happening over and over without any difference in behavior, then you're not witnessing growth. You're witnessing repetition. Never ignore consistency. Consistency is one of the strongest signs of genuine interest. It doesn't mean perfection. Nobody gets everything right all the time. But consistency means that over time, someone's actions repeatedly communicate the same message. They show up, they keep their word, they make you feel respected. They don't leave you questioning their intentions every week. You know where you stand because they've made it clear through their choices. Here's something I want you to remember. When someone values your presence, they protect it. They don't gamble with your trust. They don't repeatedly risk losing you because they assume you'll always stay. They understand that relationships require maintenance, honesty, and effort from both people. They don't wait until you're ready to walk away before suddenly deciding to care. They care consistently because they recognize your value long before there's a crisis. Sometimes people ask, how do I know if he's serious about me? I always tell them to stop listening for a moment and start watching. Watch what happens after the conversation ends. Watch whether his behavior matches the promises he made. Watch whether he remembers the important things you shared. Watch whether he supports you when you need encouragement. Watch whether he makes room for you in his life without constantly being reminded. Those quiet actions reveal far more than impressive words ever will. The hardest part about accepting this truth is realizing that excuses can become comforting because they allow us to hold on to hope. Every excuse creates another reason to wait, another reason to believe tomorrow will finally be different. But there comes a point when protecting your own peace becomes more important than protecting someone else's excuses. You deserve a relationship where effort is freely given, not constantly negotiated. You deserve someone whose actions remove your doubts instead of creating new ones. When a man truly values you, he doesn't simply tell you that you matter. He lives in a way that makes you feel it every single day through his consistency, his honesty, his respect, and the choices he makes when nobody is forcing him to make them. Your self-respect is more powerful than constant pursuit. That's a lesson many people learn only after they've spent far too much time chasing someone who was never running toward them in the first place. When your heart is involved, it's easy to believe that trying harder will eventually produce a different result. You convince yourself that if you're more patient, more understanding, more available, or more forgiving, the other person will finally recognize your value. But real love doesn't require you to abandon your dignity just to keep someone's attention. The moment you begin sacrificing your self-respect to hold on to another person, you're paying too high a price for something that should never have cost you your peace. One of the biggest misunderstandings about love is believing that persistence always wins. We hear stories about never giving up, fighting for what we want, and refusing to walk away. Those ideas can be inspiring in the right situations, but they become dangerous when they're applied to one-sided relationships. There's a difference between fighting for a relationship where both people are making an effort and chasing someone who has repeatedly shown they aren't willing to meet you halfway. One is commitment. The other is emotional exhaustion. I've watched people spend months trying to earn attention that should have been given freely. Every day begins with wondering whether today's message will finally receive the response they've been hoping for. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to prove they're worthy of love. Slowly, without realizing it, they begin measuring their value by someone else's level of interest. That's a painful place to live because your confidence becomes dependent on another person's choices instead of your own understanding of who you are. The truth is, your worth has never depended on whether someone chooses to call you back. Your value isn't determined by how quickly someone replies to your messages or how often they make plans with you. Those things may reveal their priorities, but they don't define your importance as a person. Too many people confuse rejection with lack of value. They're not the same thing. Someone failing to appreciate you doesn't make you less valuable. It simply means they failed to recognize what was standing in front of them. Think about a priceless work of art sitting in a room where nobody understands its significance. The painting doesn't lose its beauty because the people walking past it don't recognize its value. It remains exactly what it has always been. The opinions of others never change its true worth. The same principle applies to you. Your character, your kindness, your loyalty, your compassion, and your ability to love deeply don't become less meaningful because one person couldn't appreciate them. When people lose their self-respect, it rarely happens all at once. It happens in small moments. You overlook broken promises because you don't want to start an argument. You accept being ignored because you tell yourself they're probably busy. You lower your expectations because you're afraid that asking for more will push them away. Then one day, you wake up and realize you've accepted treatment you once promised yourself you would never tolerate. That's how boundaries disappear, not through one major decision, but through many small compromises. Healthy love should never require you to become smaller just so someone else feels comfortable. You shouldn't have to silence your feelings, hide your needs, or pretend everything is fine when your heart is hurting. A relationship should be a place where honesty is welcome, not punished. If expressing your feelings always results in being ignored, criticized, or made to feel like you're asking for too much, then the problem isn't your expectations. The problem is that your emotional needs are not being respected. Self-respect gives you the courage to walk away from situations that repeatedly drain your spirit. That doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop loving them at the expense of yourself. There's a big difference. Caring about someone should never require abandoning your own emotional well-being. The healthiest relationships are built by two people who both respect themselves enough to respect each other. Many people fear letting go because they believe they won't find anyone else. Fear has a way of convincing you that a painful relationship is better than no relationship at all. It whispers that loneliness is worse than disappointment. But let me tell you something. There is a special kind of loneliness that comes from being with someone who continually makes you feel unseen. Sitting beside someone who doesn't value your presence can feel far lonelier than sitting by yourself in complete peace. When you choose self-respect over constant pursuit, something remarkable begins to happen. Your focus shifts. Instead of spending all your energy wondering why someone isn't choosing you, you begin asking whether there's someone you should be choosing. That's a powerful change because it places responsibility where it belongs. You're no longer waiting to be selected. You're evaluating whether the relationship aligns with your values, your goals, and the kind of life you want to build. Confidence isn't pretending you don't care. Confidence is knowing that you'll be okay regardless of someone else's decision. It's understanding that your happiness cannot rest entirely in another person's hands. When you know your value, rejection may disappoint you, but it won't destroy you. You'll grieve what could have been, learn from the experience, and continue moving forward because your identity isn't built on someone else's approval. People often mistake self-respect for pride or stubbornness. They're completely different. Pride refuses to admit mistakes. Self-respect refuses to accept repeated disrespect. Pride says, I don't need anybody. Self-respect says, I deserve relationships built on mutual care, honesty, and effort. One isolates you from others. The other protects you from unhealthy patterns. Knowing the difference can change the direction of your entire life. There comes a point when you have to stop asking, how do I make this person love me? And start asking, why am I working so hard for love that isn't being freely given? That single question has the power to transform the way you approach every relationship. Love should never feel like an endless competition where you're constantly trying to prove your worth. The right relationship allows you to be appreciated for who you are, not for how hard you're willing to chase. When you stand firmly in your self-respect, you stop begging for attention, stop negotiating for basic kindness, and stop settling for inconsistent affection. You begin expecting actions that match words, honesty that builds trust, and effort that reflects genuine care. That quiet confidence becomes one of the most attractive qualities you can possess because it tells the world that while you're fully capable of loving someone deeply, you will never abandon your own value just to keep someone from walking away.